There we go. Okay. So we should be live. Oh, yeah, we're live. Great, cool. That was fast. All right, so hi, folks. Welcome back. I apologize for messing up the location in the description. I got it right everywhere except for there. I'm sorry. And for people on the internet, that is why we are late today. On that note, in case anyone is showing up online, I should get the chat going. It lives! Yes, Eastay, it lives. I don't know who Eastay is, but I'm sorry we're so far behind. I cannot input text correctly, apparently. So, also let me check my audio levels. Test. Yeah, we should be okay. If it's quiet, let me know. So, yeah, welcome back. We're going to do software project management today. I'm hoping that we can go through a lot of the material and content a little more quickly, and then we can get more into the discussion side, because the concepts and practices are pretty simple in terms of like the concrete steps, but what gets complicated with project management is the reality of things. Your 2004 email name is fine. Mine is like, sorry, chat. But yeah, mine is terrible too. But the more useful part for project management is like, you know, oh, my engineers are never completing all their sprint tasks, what do I do? Or velocity is highly variable, what do I do? Or, you know, I don't know if I should use Kanban for this project or if we should just waterfall it, all that kind of stuff. So I'm hoping that towards the end we can spend more time talking about that. So yeah, let's get moving. As usual, everyone here, you're all regulars, you know me, so we can skip over this. And as usual, you know, I'm not an expert. I don't have any PM certifications. I've just been doing this for a bit. I'm going to work on certifications. But, you know, I haven't written a book. This is just my personal experience, and it's also why I want to get to the discussion part, because I'm sure we all have stuff that we could share with each other to all be better at what we do. So we're going to go over a lot today, but again, not a lot of stuff is going to be in too much detail. We're going to take a brief moment to go over kind of the origin of software engineering and why everything is the way it is. We'll go over waterfall, which is kind of the traditional way to do things. We'll talk about Agile. We'll talk about how Agile gets all messed up because PMs are bad, including myself. We'll talk about Agile methodologies, distinct from Agile, and then we'll go over like strategies, tips, and tricks. And then we may or may not do mock project management. When we get to that point, depending on how you guys feel, we could either do like mock planning a project or we can do discussion. So let's see how it goes. Or before any questions about this agenda or anything that you're like, wait, why aren't we talking about this or that? Cool. What's up? Kind of. Yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. So first off, kind of going over the origin of software engineering. A lot of software engineering came out of manufacturing, right? Because software engineering, you didn't have like, it was all like punch cards and shit, right? So you would do a lot of, you know, you had the big vacuum tube computers and they were meant to just do theoretical math problems, right? And then once it kind of got from theoretical math problems into more like actual usage, it was, hey, let's make this specific hardware to solve this specific manufacturing problem. And that's when software kind of started entering industry and becoming much more popular. And it went into, it was mostly meant to kind of help planning things, right? And everything was planned in advance, right? So you had to pre-order all of your parts. You had to make sure that your fabricators were configured correctly. You had to make sure that your laborers were hired, right? It was lots of spreadsheets and finance and organizing all this kind of stuff. And software was used to solve these kind of logistical problems. And it kind of went deep into that mode of work, that style of work, and that kind of carried into software into the future and up to now, until Agile happened. So basically, when software projects were first treated as like actual genuine standalone projects, they were treated like a manufacturing project where you would have everything planned in explicit detail. You'd lay out all of your logic, and then you'd finally build it. So it's like, imagine if every like condition and loop of your code was planned in advance before you started writing the code, right? It wasn't quite that bad, but it was pretty close. Does that kind of make sense so far as to kind of how things started and how it kind of doesn't, why it doesn't make sense and why things changed? So far, so good? So out of this kind of manufacturing style arose this idea of waterfall, right? Where if you look at like, if you look on the presentation here, you see this kind of stepwise thing going down that looks like a series of waterfalls, and that's why it was called waterfall. And the big thing with waterfall is you have your features, right? And you have to make sure you plan all your features, right? And then you're shooting for a deadline, and you might miss the deadline, but you know, stuff misses deadlines all the time. You've heard about construction projects, manufacturing projects. They always like, the deadlines are a little malleable, but the feature set is concrete. And so waterfall kind of works like that too. Now, a lot of people, when you hear them talk about, oh, we're using waterfall and that's so bad, waterfall is not inherently bad. The problem is that if you're not managing your projects consciously, you fall into doing things in a waterfall manner without knowing that you're doing waterfall. So you don't use the waterfall practices and you don't behave in a waterfall manner, and then it ends up bad, right? But if you're like, hey, the features are more important than the deadlines, we're going to target the features, and therefore we will use waterfall and we will follow waterfall practices, then everything can be fine. So it's still viable given the proper situation, but the problem is a lot of people just kind of fall into it rather than consciously make that decision. Does that make sense? Cool. So it's still viable, but you know, you should consciously choose waterfall, not just happen to fall into it. Ha, ha. Okay. And so after things were very planned out in detail for a while, the business was like, but software can change quickly, right? Why don't we go faster? So there ended up being this idea of the Agile Manifesto. And I'm actually going to pull it up here real quick. And this is basically like, you know, a bunch of overweight white dudes, but they're actually pretty smart. And the idea was, we want to deliver software faster, right? The way of planning everything in advance, right? When it comes to a knowledge domain, you don't necessarily know everything in advance. You need to figure stuff out. So having everything planned in advance just doesn't work. The deadlines shift by too much, right? So we need to figure out a way to develop software faster without having to plan everything in advance when that planning doesn't get used effectively, right? Now, also to be clear, I'm not saying planning is bad. You still need planning. We'll talk about that more in a minute. But there's like planning where every nut and bolt goes, and planning like, you know, we need to set a panel here, okay? So the idea with this is, you know, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan, right? So basically, work as a team together and try to adapt and get stuff done quickly as you learn about what you're needing to build, okay? Now, that's not to say that the development team should figure out all the requirements on their own. Absolutely not, right? But because software is complicated, because business requirements are often complicated, we have to be a bit more flexible in figuring out how things work. We need to experiment. We need to adjust when we find problems, all these kinds of things. So there we go. Now, one key thing about these points. Over does not mean abandon, right? So individuals and interactions over processes and tools, that doesn't mean don't use processes and tools. You still need processes and tools, right? But prioritize the individuals and the interactions over the processes and tools, right? So for example, let's say that you have a very strict process for defining requirements on how a project gets implemented, right? And then a big business change happens. Maybe the company purchases some child company who already does this big part of a project, and you don't need to do that anymore, and instead you just need to contact their system, right? Well, if you're very strict about the processes and tools, you're not going to accommodate that change, and you're going to duplicate the work that the company is already doing, right? But if you prioritize individuals and interactions, you talk to people and be like, hey, what's going on? Has anything changed? Oh, you don't need to do this work anymore. You can just connect to these guys. Then you're like, great. So let's figure out what these interactions are. Let's talk to the individuals involved to figure out how it works, and then let's adjust, okay? So that is the ideal version of Agile, right? Now, that's not to say that the processes and tools are abandoned, right? During a normal working style, you still want that very nicely defined requirements process, right? But it's a prioritization thing, okay? And again, working software over comprehensive documentation, right? Many engineers are like, oh, so I don't need to do documentation? No, no, you need to do documentation, right? But make sure the stuff works before making sure it's documented in detail. Because if you document it in detail and then you have to change it, well, now you just wasted a bunch of time, right? So kind of do these things together. Now, that's not to say that you don't want to document your plan of things, right? Documenting planning is good, but there needs to be this balance, okay? Focus on getting stuff working, and then you can make sure that documentation is good. And then customer collaboration over contract negotiation, same idea, although you have to be careful with that because of legal things, right? If the contract says you must do this and it is a legally binding contract, well, you better do that. Or if it doesn't make sense to do that, get the business folks to renegotiate the contract, right? But the idea is work with your customer directly. Don't just focus on like, oh, we agreed to this and it's just going to work that way, right? And then don't be afraid to respond to change. Similar to what I was saying earlier with the company thing, change is okay. Now, those of you who are more critically minded are thinking like, wait a second, I'm still feeling red flags, and we're going to talk about that in a second, okay? But I do recommend on your own time going over the detailed principles of Agile. They have 12 detailed principles, and often PMs will miss these, so you can go over that in your own time because I don't want to spend too much time on this part. But does the Agile Manifesto make sense so far? Cool. Now, one thing you will notice, this is not a series of steps. This is not a process, okay? This is a way of thinking. If someone says, we follow the Agile process, they don't know what they're fucking talking about, okay? There is no Agile process, okay? There is Scrum, there is Kanban, there is scalable Agile framework, right? But there is no methodology and process called Agile. Agile is a way of thinking about how to manage and deliver software projects, okay? Now, granted, when I say, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh. When I say someone doesn't know what they're talking about, maybe they're just mixing up terms. But at least they haven't gone through and looked at the theory in detail. So. All right, so moving forward. I mentioned earlier the more critically minded being like, wait, I'm still seeing red flags. People can take Agile too far, especially if they don't understand it. For example, if they forget the over not being abandoned, right? They might abandon planning altogether, or they might abandon documentation altogether, right? And this causes Agile to just become chaos, right? And you will see this very often. They're like, oh, we're Agile. It's like, okay, what does that mean? Oh, that means like we don't do planning and requirements collection. No, that just sounds like you're not running your projects well. That's not Agile, right? So some ways that you can notice if Agile has just become chaos is if the business people are accessing your engineers directly, right? Don't let that happen. Now, if your engineers need help or if there's some kind of emergency, it makes sense. But if the business is delivering requirements to your engineers directly, assuming you don't have someone whose role is specifically to go get requirements, then you have a problem. Or if there's no documentation. Documentation is good. You need it. It doesn't have to be super, super, super detailed, right? But you need something. Also, if you have no scheduling or process, that's bad, right? How does new work come in? What is the process for getting work done? What is the process for delivery, right? How do you let customers know what you did, right? If these things are missing, that's just chaos, right? And if people are like, oh, we're Agile, so we don't do that, they need to slow their roll, okay? And then limited planning as well. If they don't do enough planning, so for example, they're like, oh, we need to add some new fields to track, the number of people in the building. It's like, okay, what's the limit, right? Like, are there buildings with more than like 100,000 people? I genuinely don't know. And that's the kind of stuff that should be captured in planning, right? Other things that can cause Agile to go too far is many PMs don't have a lot of formal training. A lot of PMs are just software engineers who happened to be a little bit more organized than everyone else or happened to be better communicators, and they got made a PM. Hi, I'm Beege. I was the most communicative of the engineers in my team, and I was the only one who had really done any kind of Scrum training, so I became the PM. Yeah, so hopefully I'm higher skill now than I was to be telling you about this stuff. I put a lot of effort into training, researching stuff, but yeah. That's also why we're going to have a discussion period towards the end. And you'll know when Agile has gone too far when there's overwork, burnout, failed projects, or worst, dead startups, right? Because if you're part of a key aspect of project management is resource management. Do you have enough engineers to get the work done? Do you have enough engineers to get the work done by that point in time? Are you selecting the right solutions based on the number of engineers you have? If you're not doing project management properly, you won't have proper answers to these questions, and it's going to be bad. So kind of this, death to Agile as like, oh, we don't do any planning, we're Agile. But long live Agile in the sense of we want to be adaptive to work while not having chaos. But to that end, there are different methodologies to encourage a more proper Agile. Okay, so we're going to go over that next. But any questions about this part so far? Cool. So the first one I'm going to go over is Kanban because it's the simplest. Kanban is great when you want to go fast, but you don't necessarily have specific deadlines, okay? If you just have a bunch of work and you just need to keep pumping it out and you can deliver whenever, Kanban is great because it's very, very low overhead, but it focuses on speed. So the core idea with Kanban is WIP, work in progress, okay? Why? Because the more things you're working on at once, you're going to go slower on all of those things. If you focus on one thing at a time, you can go faster. Okay? So the core concept of Kanban is to minimize your work in progress. Okay? Usually, you don't want to have more than one or two things in progress. Your WIP should be less than 3. Okay? Ideally, it should be 1, but maybe like something's blocked or you're waiting for an answer on something and you don't want to just sit there. But you shouldn't have a WIP of more than 2. And another big thing in Kanban is visualizing your work. Have you discretely defined the work that you're going to do? What is the status of that work, right? If anyone needs to know, if anyone has a dependency on your work, how do they know when your work is done, right? If you visualize your work, you solve all these problems. Now, the most basic version of Kanban is using a Kanban board, which, it started with, here's a wall, here's a bunch of Post-its, right? And that's very simple. And it's incredibly effective. That alone, if you don't have any kind of task management process, can be a huge improvement. Especially because if you're doing this for the whole team, all you got to do if you want to see how someone's doing is just go look at the board. And you can be like, Alex, why do you have a WIP of 5, right? Or hey, is this task next because I'm waiting on it, right? This kind of stuff. Additionally, there is the concept. I'll come back to that. There is the concept of a backlog. Basically, work that needs to get done but is not being done in the near future, you can just kind of put it in the backlog. They also call it an icebox sometimes. And then whenever that work is ready to be done soon, then you put it onto the board in your to-do list. Okay? Another key thing with Agile is that, another key thing with Kanban is team members can pull on tasks as they're able to, right? So they don't have to wait for someone to assign the task for them. They just go to the board and say, oh, this is next on the list, in progress. I will go start work on this. Done, right? You don't have to have a whole big process. You don't have to have a whole bunch of meetings. However, if you are going to have engineers pull on tasks, this means you must have your tasks prioritized in order, okay? So you need someone to prioritize the backlog. Either a product owner or product owner is a Scrum term, but it's kind of bleeding out of Scrum now. You need some kind of product manager or stakeholder or someone to make the decision of what is the priority of tasks. Now, this is great if you don't have a dedicated PM, which if you don't, oh God, I'm sorry, good luck. But if you don't have one, Kanban's a good option because the process is just making sure stuff is up here, checking your whip and making it small, and then just moving stuff along as you go, okay? You don't need any special meetings, except for maybe your backlog prioritization, and engineers can operate mostly autonomously. However, if your engineers are not very proactive, you need someone to push them, because this process won't push them, okay? Does that make sense for Kanban? Cool. All right, I'm gonna go a little bit faster because I'm noticing people getting a little sleepy here. So, all right, Scrum. This one is more complicated, but Scrum is better if you have tight deadlines, right? If you have to deliver all the time, Scrum. Scrum is the way to go, okay? Now, Scrum is highly, highly structured. It has a explicit set of meetings, an explicit way of doing work. It has explicit roles for the people in the process, and you don't have to follow it exactly, okay? Now, when you do follow the Scrum process perfectly, it actually feels really nice. It feels like kind of reliable and stable, but it doesn't fit every team, okay? So if certain things don't make sense for your team, ditch them. But in any case, Scrum actually predates Agile, which kind of makes sense. Because there are times where people feel like Scrum is too much process, or the project manager is like sticking too tightly to Scrum, which is the opposite of Agile, right? Individuals and interaction over processes and tools, right? But if you're sticking to Scrum and it's making your work harder, that's not good. So if you do use Scrum, make sure to either customize it to your needs or make sure that you don't let it bog down your development. Now the thing is, we talked about Agile becomes chaos. Scrum is kind of a counterbalance to that. If you're following Scrum, it's actually pretty hard for Agile to become chaos. Unless your PM super sucks, which we'll talk about in a minute because I have been that PM before. But we'll go over some basic concepts. Again, we won't go into huge details because I don't want to make people sleepy. And once you know the concepts, you can go read more on them on your own. But the key concept is that Scrum is divided into sprints. You have discrete spans of time in which you define work to be done. And then at the end, you have a whole bunch of processes and rituals to see, okay, how did we do on this work? Share the work with the customer, and then what work are we doing next? Okay? It also defines a number of roles. So there's like a Scrum Master, the person who manages a lot of the rituals, the PO, who's responsible for managing the backlog, and then the development team itself. Okay? And another, similar to Kanban, it's an open backlog. You can just kind of toss stuff into the backlog, and then the PO can prioritize it as needed. So if you as an engineer are like, I implemented this thing, it's bad, but I had to go fast. Let me create an issue to fix it as technical debt and put it in the backlog. And then later the PO can prioritize it. Okay? So there are a couple of rituals. Again, I'm not going to go into detail for each one. But Scrum defines these 5 meetings where you have a daily stand-up where you sync with your team and everyone can say if they're having problems or if they need help. Backlog grooming, which is going through the backlog and prioritizing it and removing unnecessary tasks. Sprint planning, where you say what work you're going to do over the next sprint, which is usually like 2 to 3 weeks. Sprint retrospective, where you look back on the sprint and you're like, what went well, what went bad, what can we do better? And sprint review, where you basically share what you did in that sprint with your customer or any other stakeholders, okay? This is like textbook Scrum, okay? You don't have to do all of this. For example, my team doesn't do review a whole lot. We do review on more of kind of an ad hoc basis, right? But we do planning and retrospective religiously. Like we do that very hard. And usually the process is like you do review to kind of share, at the end of the sprint, you do review with your customer, be like, here's what we made, do you like it? And then you do retrospective to see, okay, based on what the customer said and based on our feeling of this sprint, did we do a good job and what can we do better? And then you go through grooming and it's like, okay, based on everything that we learned from review and retrospective, how can we reprioritize our work? And then planning where it's like, okay, let's commit to the work we're going to do in the next sprint over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Okay, does that make sense so far on Scrum? Great. If you've heard of Scrum before, you've probably heard of all this stuff. So the more interesting stuff is going to be in the discussion and all that. So that's kind of all the textbook content. I want to go over a couple of strategies and tips and tricks real quick that I think you'll want to know about in any case. So first off, your project manager has to be fearless. They have to go to the product manager or business people and say, like, look, that is not possible. We need to figure out how we're going to do this in a different way. All right? If your PM's not able or willing to do that, you're going to have a bad time. Okay? Also, you need to manage expectations with your customers. Okay? And that means including a buffer on your timeline estimates. Okay? If you're like, oh yeah, we'll be able to deliver this whole feature in like maybe 2 sprints, make it 3. Okay? Give yourself a buffer. I mean, ideally you should deliver 1 feature a sprint, but it depends on the complexity of the project. It depends on all this kind of stuff, and nothing is ideal. Also, if you are using story points in your sprint, which if you go read about sprint planning, you can learn more about that. But if you're using story points, maintain them. And by that, what I mean is, if for some reason you need to add something to the sprint, which you really shouldn't do, but sometimes it happens, when you add something, remove something of similar value. Okay? Otherwise, you're going to overwork your engineers, you're going to fail your sprints, and everyone's going to be upset. And then when you do that, again, managing expectations, let your customers know, hey, we committed to this for the sprint, but it had to change because of some kind of emergency. All right? It's all communication. And then another thing, sprints are commitments. When you say, I know a lot of this is Scrum specific, but it's because Scrum is the most popular. When you commit to the work to be done in a sprint, you want to kind of commit to what you know you can do in that sprint time with absolute confidence, okay? Because you should treat it as a commitment. You have promised this person, we will deliver this in the next 2 weeks, okay? So what you want to do is you want to undercommit, and then ideally you deliver more than you commit to, okay? It is much, 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 much better for an engineer to pull something off of the backlog than to have items remaining at the end of the sprint, okay? So underallocate your engineers if necessary. Do not overallocate them, okay? And I can't read what the hell I wrote here. Tooling, thank you. Let me fix this so I don't have that problem again, even though we're almost done. Yeah, so use good project management tools. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use like the full version of Jira, right? Maybe a corkboard and some Post-its is good enough. Or maybe, depending on your team's culture, that's even better, right? So look through different tools, whether they're digital or analog, and figure out what works for your team. Some people really just like having something physical, right? So maybe doing like a Post-it board is much better, or a whiteboard or something. Or some teams want like a lot of structure and they want to be able to configure everything and connect everything and be able to like trace through the entire structure of a project, and then it's like, okay, we're using Jira, got it, right? Figure out what works for your team and choose the right tool for the right job, in case you haven't heard me say that before, right? And then when it comes to retrospectives, like whether you're doing Scrum or not, do retrospectives, because you ideally want to be getting faster and faster. You want your engineers to become better engineers. You want your projects to get smoother and smoother. Now, remember, there's no such thing as infinite growth, right? But if you're here coming to this talk, chances are you can grow from where you are now, right? So do your retrospectives, right? And also, when you do retrospectives, try to change them up every time. If you ask the same questions every time, your engineers are going to get bored, and they're just not going to pay attention. You're going to be like, what did we do badly? It's like, we're slow. Okay, why? What should we do better? Faster. Okay, how? So for example, the PM in my team, every week she comes up with a different theme. So like this last sprint, the theme was like, winter, Christmas time. So it's like, what was lost under the snow, right? Or what presents are you looking forward to opening? Like this kind of stuff. As just a way to kind of mix it up. It sounds silly, and honestly it kind of is, But just that little bit of variety, no matter how silly it is, keeps people engaged and keeps people participating. And also changing the way that you word these questions of what went well, what went poorly, what should we do better. Just changing the way you say that has a big effect alone, because people just think about things a little bit differently each time, and that's useful. And also, track the stuff that you talk about in retrospectives. So if you say like, hey, we need to start recording a definition of done in every task that we define, start tracking that. How often are we defining definition of done? Is it actually helping us? Do people feel like things are improved when we're doing definition of done more? Are we doing definition of done more? These kinds of things. And to that end, focus on developing habits. Your retrospectives should basically be a to-do list of habits to build. Okay? And then next up is customize. So we talked about Kanban, we talked about Scrum. There's also other methodologies like the Shape Up framework, which I keep wanting to study, but I haven't yet, because it sounds really nice. There's also the Scalable Agile framework, which is very enterprisey and very corporate, but also seems very nice. I've heard good things about that. But whatever methodology you choose, like customize it. Make it fit your team. Because again, individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Okay? So make sure that stuff fits your team more than adhering to a process or tool very strictly. And then also don't skimp out on doing the PM work, right? If you're like, oh, if we use this process, we don't have to do any PM work. No. Someone will need to do PM work. Ideally, you'll have a dedicated PM. But if not, at least figure out who is going to do the PM work. And lastly, specialize. Because often, especially in Korea, you'll have like someone who's doing product management, basically requirements engineering, prioritization, road mapping, and project management. What work is getting done over the next 2 weeks? Who's doing which work, right? If you have the same person doing these two things, it's a conflict of interest. Because a product person, they want more features now, right? The project person wants more time and to get things done as quickly as possible. So the project person might skimp out on quality a bit in order to hit deadlines, right? And the product person might want more work to get done than is possible and might burn out your team. These two people, in an ideal, like I'm talking about more junior versions of these roles, because a more senior person should be accounting for all of this. But ideally, these people should be in conflict, okay? If you're like, well, I don't want conflict, conflict is good. Conflict is how you learn. Conflict is how you arrive at the best solution by compromising based on values. As long as it doesn't get personal. Once conflict gets personal, you're screwed. So make sure to specialize the different roles as needed if you can. Okay, let's say you have a team of only engineers, you don't have a dedicated kind of support person, be like, hey, you engineer act as the product person, you engineer act as the PM person, make sure they're different people. Okay? All right, so awesome, we covered that in like 30 minutes. Right? Faster than usual. I could go in more detail, but like honestly, the facts of this stuff is kind of boring. It's more like, what's the reality of all this stuff, right? And so that's what I want to spend more today going over. So before we open up for questions, just to help me mentally prepare when I open to questions, would you guys rather kind of do a mock project and go through kind of managing a project, or would you rather just have open discussion about the problems you're encountering, scenarios you can imagine, this kind of stuff? So second one. Okay, well, hold up. Let's do this in a structured way, okay? So, and you can vote twice, that's fine, or you can vote 0, that's fine. We're just going to count totals. Yeah. So who wants to plan a mock project together? All right, so we got 3. We can just do like a simple web. We can do the event management system that I keep saying I'm going to build someday. Okay. We'll figure it out. I didn't have any time to prepare because I slept maybe 12 hours this week. No, that's an exaggeration. I didn't get enough sleep this week, so I didn't have a lot of time to prepare stuff. Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's getting better. It's getting better. This was the end of the chaos. So we had 3 for doing a mock project. Who wants to just have open project management discussion?
I'm not a good learner.
So we got 2 and 3. So we'll do the mock project stuff. Okay. I mean, that's okay. This is not Australia. We don't coerce people to vote. There we go. Hi. Oh, she can be the tie-breaking vote. Actually, it wasn't a tie-break. Never mind. Don't worry about it. Just take a seat. It's fine. Okay, so we'll do a mock project, and then if time, the clock is dead. Yeah, I got. Yeah, we still got an hour, so we're fine. We'll do a mock project, and then if that goes smoothly, we'll probably finish it early, and then we can do discussion, or we'll probably mix discussion into the project. So, all right. So cool. I can mentally prepare for that. Before we get into that, any questions about the stuff we covered so far?
I don't have past rights with POs that I want to just PTSD today. All the stuff you said they should do, and I think all the things they didn't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Feels like that way.
Yeah.
I have got PTSD,
So
daily meeting.
So to be fair, like, PM is a hard role.
Or not having one, just having a PO is like not worth its salt.
Yeah, that sucks. Or having only a product person without a project person, not fun. Yeah, ideally, well, not ideally. Ideally, you hire someone, but secondarily, I guess, maybe the engineering manager should step up.
The highlight, like, there's like 100 things that I just really want to point out, like, talk especially about like deadlines and stuff. Like, what he would do is we would plan out the scrum perfectly, right? And everybody would be like, this is how much time I need for this task, and like the engineers know how much time they require. They give themselves that buffer zone, and then we agree on it, and then the PO would come in like that evening or like just after work and reduce all that.
Whoa.
Yeah, so you'd have a task for 3 days, he would reduce everything to 1 day.
Wow.
And then also be like, well, not only should you get the stuff done in that time, like so a 2-week
Sprint. Yeah.
sprint. He's like, get it done in 1 week and then grab stuff from the backlog and get it done. But we already said it's impossible. In fact, a lot of cases, it's like, yeah, we're still even being optimistic trying to get those things done in 2 weeks. He would just mark them down. He would just half a day. He would like something we would have like 2 or 3 days, and he would mark it to 0.5. I'm like, what is that? What is that? 4 hour? Like, how do you?
Was this the CEO?
This was a PO that worked directly under a CFO, and there was a CEO. It's a startup, so I worked named with a startup.
I would bring that to the CEO.
He was stupid. He thought like getting stuff done faster means we get money faster.
Then I would get all the engineers to quit.
Well, that's what happened.
Cool. Okay. So for the benefit of the stream, and like, we said we were going to do the mock project management. So war stories are fun, but we voted to do the mock project management, so we're going to go that side. But for the benefit of the stream, just telling a story about like basically a PO. The team went through the Scrum process, defined the sprint, defined all the story points, and the PO went and changed all the story points and reduced them, and just said make it work. That, yeah, no, I just have everyone up and leave. Like, screw that. Well, report to the chain of command, and if that doesn't work, then leave. But yeah. Anyway, okay, so mock project management. So we are going to. Which one did I don't remember. We're going to have to find out. So for our mock project, we're going to go over the event member management system, which I swear I'm building, even though I haven't touched the code in like 6 months, because it's a pretty simple use case, and everyone should have at least some domain knowledge because you're here. You know how this stuff works. So also, please be understanding because I have not had time to plan this. It's going to be an adventure. So let's go to GitHub, and where is it? CodeSoul, and event. Nope. Okay, we're just going to do that. Oh god, I feel so bad for not actually. Oh, that's right. You're doing an Elixir version. All right, but I think I did some stuff here. No, did I not? Perfect. Okay. Great. So we're going to use GitHub projects. I don't know what the feature is called. Now, I have seen companies use GitHub projects. I have not used it professionally myself. I've only used it for small scale stuff. And for small scale stuff, it works well enough. I'm not going to advocate for or against it because I'm not familiar with it enough to say that. But we're going to use that for this to demonstrate. Sounds good, Eastay. I will keep an eye on that. Sorry if I was late seeing the message. All right, so I had to remember how to do this.
Maybe you need to sign in first.
Oh, that would, yeah, thank you. I was like, why is there not a button to, all right, give me a second to sign in here. Actually, wait, hold up. Let's do this. Yeah. Okay. Because in case I mistype stuff, you guys don't all need to know my credentials. Oh, that's right. I said a passkey. Hell yeah. Yes. Modern technology, baby. All right, here we go. Yeah. No. Projects are per repository. Or at least, I'm pretty sure they're per repository.
You can have as many as you want. Like you can have one project, then you have like different.
Okay, cool. So let's, oh, they have a learn thing. Yeah, that's slick, but that's not what we're gonna do. So we're gonna do new project. And, crap, maybe I should have chosen a tool that I knew. You know what? No, let's do something I'm a little more familiar with because but I am curious, but I don't want to, yeah, let's use Trello.
I mean, the team planning is like, Kanban. You can add new columns and
Yeah, okay, screw it. Yeah, let's just go for it then. All right, so we should be able to.
Could you create the other one from scratch again?
Sure.
I used it in the past, so I know.
Okay, I can't delete this one, I guess.
Go back. Any project.
Future release?
Team planning.
Yeah, okay.
And name it.
Yep. So, event member management.
Yep.
All right, let's go. All right, yeah, here we go. Okay, thank you. So, this, who recognizes this?
Looks like
This is exactly a Kanban board, right? So with something like event member management, this is like an open source project, right? It's just we're all working on it together. There's no business pushing deadlines and such. We could enforce deadlines on ourselves, but we don't really need to. So let's assume we're doing Kanban for now, right? And then maybe, given some time, we can try doing it in more Scrum style depending on how stuff works out. So let us. Okay, that's to add a new swim lane. We can add an item. Is that item going to be type hash to select a repository? Yeah, there we go. There we go. Oh, baby. Oh, I like this. Okay. So wait, these are merge requests. Or no, these are issues or
you can create a new issue there.
I want to add items from that. There we go. But these are all, aren't these PRs?
They look like PRs.
Yeah, this is a PR. It's also an already merged PR. Why is it? Okay, here we go.
Well, it's like, everything is an issue in GitHub projects. That's how it works.
That's true. Okay. Oh, these are finished ones. Okay. Wait, is that it? Okay, I guess that's it. Yeah, let's just do everything. Worst case, I can always make more.
What's that one up there in the middle different from all?
This one?
Yeah, what's that symbol?
It's a PR that was not merged. It was a closed PR. Yeah. Oh man, wait, is that? That's not you, is it, Carlos? No, that's the other guy. He was. I don't remember. There was one Japanese guy who was really like jamming on this, and he was really good, but he doesn't come here anymore. I don't know what happened to him. Anyway, So yeah, so basically this would be like, does this have a backlog?
Well, the first one you can move it to cancel because it's not possible.
Oh yeah, we learned that. Okay.
Create a new one and add it.
There's a way you can create automated, like instead of columns and all that, it has like full columns already.
All right, so yeah, let's just do that for now. And then one nice thing here is that it has a limit, right? So we talked earlier about work in progress, right? And you want to minimize your work in progress. A very common feature of Kanban boards is having a limit to be like, no, you're not doing more than this amount of work at one time. So we could set a limit and say, let's say we have 3 people on the project. Let's say we don't want people to work on more than 2 items at a time, so we can set our limit to 6, right?
Why is it called column?
Sorry?
Column limit? That doesn't speak to me as like.
So this column represents a status.
So you can only have 2 per in progress, but you could have what,
Yeah.
done. Like I don't know.
You can set a
two
limit
in
for
progress
any-
per
any
person.
process.
Sorry?
Two in progress per person. Like so.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that we have 3 people on the project and we have a max whip of 2. So that's how I'm doing it.
Concept width, like just the naming of it, column, and there's only 1 progress column. If you had a bugs column, for example, like then are you saying could you? Well, we have 1 for each, or can you have 2 per column?
No, that's
I can have 2 in progresses, but I'm also working on 2 bugs.
It depends on how many people are working on what. Then
Yeah.
you divide the work based on, you say, okay, you have 2 issues, and then you set a limit for those 2 people.
yeah. Additionally, there are some project management styles treat bugs as a separate kind of work. Some project management styles treat bugs as just a normal kind of work. Personally, I like to treat bugs as just a normal kind of work because an engineer still has to spend time on it. So to me, whether it's a bug or whether it's a feature, it still goes into the in progress column. What's up?
For me, what I used to use was like you create a hotfix column.
Mm.
Because most of the times, like if a bug shows up, it's something that needs to be worked on.
Mm.
So you just put it in a hotfix, and then somebody will talk, or you just talk about it and say like, okay, we're having like a bug for this and this and this. This person worked on this one. Can you please fix this?
Mm.
Then you kind of like have again to shift the timeline that you've given him to work on the in progress one.
Mm.
So there's a way you kind of like flip the work, and then
Ah.
so it becomes a priority because like it's already like let's say you're having like a production application. So
Right.
if a bug shows up and this one is shipped already, so you need somebody to do a hotfix on that. So basically you just put like a hotfix column, and if people see the hotfix column, you react on that very fast.
Mm.
How do that on that?
Yeah, so Derek was saying that in his past experience, they had a hotfix column for things like bugs. And so hotfix was basically a way to kind of circumvent the normal workflow, because if something appears in hotfix, you're working on it.
But then also you need to have some kind of buffer in advance that you assign, like, hey, if we have a bug, so this is the amount of time that we plan ahead that we can use to fix the bug.
Yeah.
That it won't disrupt the entire sprint.
So, and Alex was mentioning that, if you do that kind of thing, how do you handle sprint stuff? So I think there's 2 things here, and this is related to what we talked about in the kind of lecture portion. If you're doing Kanban, right, then this hotfix style makes sense, because you see hotfix, everything else stops, you work on hotfix, and nothing else matters, right? But if you're doing Scrum style, it introduces a problem with your sprint commitment, right? So earlier I mentioned that you should maintain your story points, right? So if you have a hotfix, or basically if you have emergent work, so in like, I'm not 100% sure if it's textbook Scrum or not, but this is how I learned it. If you have work that's added to the sprint after the sprint because it's some kind of emergency work, like a hotfix, we would usually call that emergent work because it emerged after the sprint was already planned. If you add emergent work, and let's say the emergent work is 4 points, you should remove something from the sprint that is also 4 points. So you maintain kind of you maintain your commitment of work time. And then when you do that, you need to inform your customer that you removed something for the sprint in order to do this other work that is considered more important.
Did you mention the burn down chart during presentation?
I did not mention burn down chart. Yeah.
Yeah.
But good point. We can go over that in a minute, I think. So What we could do here is we could go. I actually don't even know how much of these are possible because I haven't done the research on it yet. Which, like, this is actually kind of bad. Well,
They have very good templates, by the way.
yeah, they do.
Like you can have like an automated one. It has like 4 columns, you can add them, and then they have like roadmaps. Is that roadmap? So if you have like a task,
Mm,
it shows up here in the waterfall.
you can give it a time.
Then there's a I think
Estimation.
Use the feature.
yeah. So
You just use Jira.
so you can just like put most of the things there. Like you can run everything priority status and all that. Create colors for different stuff. So it becomes like a Jira kind of.
Yeah, everything basically copies Jira.
It's really good. It looks very nice.
So what frustrates me is that, like, everything tries to copy Jira, but Jira just does it better. But Jira still sucks. Right?
Can I ask, why does Jira suck? Like, I actually like Jira over, like, because I've been using Notion again recently.
Mm.
Notion is a nightmare, because I'm trying to customize it.
Yeah.
It's made for the layman.
Right. So Jira is great for if you're following standard processes or if you have a smaller organization. Problem is Jira is expensive. But if you have a large number of interconnected teams, Jira lacks some flexibility. For example, let's say that you have a task that multiple teams need visibility on, right? Now maybe only one team is working on it, but the other team needs to be able to see it. Can you add that task to multiple boards? On a company project, you can. On a team project, you cannot, right? But to, no, because a company project must be managed by a Jira admin.
Ah, right.
A team project can be managed by team members independently.
Why did they do that? Okay, so what would you use then in that case? What would be a solution?
Good luck.
Not Jira, what?
Actually, it's more like
Communication.
what I'm saying.
Communication, right?
This way.
So in Jira, one way that you could solve that is basically on your board, you link it to the target issue, but then the problem is that issue won't show up on your own board. It'll just show up if you go into the issue that has the dependency, which is not great, but it kind of works.
Jimmy, I used to break stuff with links. Maybe just URIs all over the place, link from one thing to another. I mean, as long as you announce it somewhere that everyone can see it, like maybe
Yeah.
in Slack or something.
Yeah. But the one thing that worked pretty nicely, Asana allows that flexibility, right? But Asana, to do sprints in Asana is not easy. It takes a lot of work to do something sprint-like in Asana, but it does have a lot of flexibility around like interconnected work, which is really cool.
I've used both Jira and Asana. It's just the person who said that Jira was no good was an Asana user. So I feel like it's one of those like Apple Windows type of situations where obviously there's good things about Asana, like you mentioned, things that Jira can do better.
So Asana is much more flexible, but is weak on enforcing process, in my opinion and experience. Whereas Jira is very good at enforcing processes and has all sorts of nice automation stuff, which I think Asana has automation too, if I remember correctly. But Jira is not nearly as flexible, right?
Personality types of humans.
Yeah, kind of. Now I have,
Project is getting better. This one,
yeah,
every like 6 months, it's improving really fast.
I really hope that the GitHub projects features are influenced by the Microsoft project team, because I hate Microsoft, but Microsoft Project is a beautiful piece of software. It is spectacular. It is amazing. I love it. It's also really expensive.
This one, like you've created a project,
Yeah.
you can have multiple repos in there.
That is cool.
Working on different stuff.
Yeah.
So you just go to the project, you click on it, then it brings up the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I have my stuff. And then, so project based.
Yeah.
Just under one.
So most project management systems, you can basically do that because they're disconnected from repositories, right? But they usually still have some kind of integration where you can connect them. So for example, with Jira, you can connect a board to one or more projects, to one or more like GitHub projects, and you can, from a Jira issue, create a GitHub branch. and say this is the branch to fulfill this issue, right? And then you can also have it so that when the issue gets merged or whatever, it can close the Jira issue, or vice versa, right? So these kinds of integrations exist in many different types of project management software. But yes, it is really cool that GitHub does that.
It's going to be way better.
I hope you're right.
Milestones and all that stuff in there, like temporary, so you can like track how much of this feature that is being developed, how far of the guy is going to that. Like, is it 50% done? So, given the milestone that you create, you kind of like attach different issues given to that milestone. So you kind of like track it. Okay, 50% of this is done.
Right. So in Scrum parlance, we have this idea of an epic, which is usually, it's often a feature, but it could also be a milestone, you know, customized to fit your needs. And it's usually something that cannot be done as a single task, right? So again, it could be a big feature, it could be a milestone, whatever. And usually you can put your milestones on kind of a roadmap view. And this is common in most types of software. And then you can basically tag issues to that epic and you're good. So it's a similar idea across all the different kinds of software project management tools. They just call it by different names, which is actually a bit frustrating. But yeah. Vincent, you were going to say something, or?
I just want to ask, because you mentioned something about Microsoft project. Isn't it not available on that?
Maybe.
Yeah, all Microsoft stuff. You have to have the Windows PC.
Does it really only work on?
But I've tried even with Power BI and Dynamics and stuff. I really have to. Like,
Look at all these ads for project management software.
I was just looking at plans for like you said, maybe integrating GitHub because they're going to allow like GitHub's open source and like,
Yeah, that looks like Windows only.
Windows.
because everything is Excel. So there's so much.
It's on
Windows
365 though.
stuff.
Oh, sold separate.
I logged into Excel. So on the Mac, how do you do Excel? You have to use, is it Iron?
For Excel, there's a native app.
This one works.
But can be used online. That's the
With
thing.
Teams, it's available.
Okay, I don't want to spend too much more time on
Linear?
this. Huh?
Linear.
MS Office,
Linear?
everything.
Linear.
Word,
Linear.com.
Office, Excel,
I've not heard of this one.
PowerPoint.
I've heard really good things about ClickUp.
Oh, okay. Is that not that come probably the other one?
But the thing is, like, it's expensive and
I totally typed that wrong, but
Ah,
whatever.
that app.
pay for it. So
That's the one that we use in
there's
remote.
nothing
Ooh,
Great.
their web design is really nice.
Yeah. I mean,
That's the
it's made by.
Oh, this looks like Notion.
But it's not Notion now. I mean,
Yeah, you're fine.
oh look, there we are.
like
Huh?
all projects.
Up.
I use it for some other.
Oh, Vercel.
personal
And remote.
projects.
Wait, where's, there it is. Okay. Netlify. Oh, wow, Supercell, really?
You know,
Yeah, yeah.
Scale, okay.
and that's the problem.
Interesting.
Struggle with
Okay.
defining, as in the
I haven't looked into this one, but I'll take a look.
understand anything. And
One that I saw that I really liked, ClickUp, seemed to have the processes and structure that Jira had, but the flexibility of Asana, and I was like, oh baby, oh. And also, they're the only one whose advertisements I've seen specifically attack Jira, which like, that's, to me that's a big deal, because like, if you're picking a fight with Jira, like, you better be good.
But that's
But yeah.
also good because the payments are stupidly high. Like,
Mm.
you want to opt into something.
Everybody hates Jira.
Too much money.
Yeah.
I don't know a single person that likes Jira.
Yeah. So in a past company, we used Jira Server, where we actually had it installed on premise. And I wanted to do some kind of analytics that it just didn't do. So I actually went into the Jira database. And whoo, buddy, it is very clever and it's very well built, but it's also a giant mess. Because it's like, this doesn't exist, but it's like 8N normalization or some crazy thing. Because, your fields are all dynamic, right? So you have linking tables of linking tables, sometimes of linking tables.
Wow.
Yeah. But it works. But that explains why it was a bit slow for certain operations, because,
They just have to join things without any kind of indexes or anything.
well, the problem is your indexes got really big, because everything had to be indexed. So, yeah. But yeah. So we said we were going to do a mock project, but I think people have kind of lost interest. Also, I don't know this tool. Yeah.
We kind of went to talking about the tooling, so I think it's relevant.
Yeah.
Why not? Like, we should have discussed it before we picked the project. But
Yeah.
there are projects available.
Yeah. So in terms of like project management tools, like some of the big ones are. Wait, no. Where is? Let's just do like. So the common ones, like Monday.com has been advertising a lot. I've never heard of this one. ClickUp seemed pretty big. What do we got? Reich. I keep seeing ads for it, and I see it everywhere on the internet. I've never met anyone who uses it. Yeah, I have no idea. And then Asana, again, very, very flexible. But to me, oh, hey, this might improve things. I don't remember if they had the workflow builder when I used it, so that might help with their process problems that I described earlier. Yeah, right. I looked into Monday.com. It seems, it's another project management tool.
It's not bad. I used it with an Israeli company because it is an Israeli company, so of course they're going to use it.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
That also is the same company that had that PO, so like he didn't know how to use it well, but I came in and just basically helped him out. 'Cause he
Okay.
was, like, half the trash, so
Okay, fair enough.
it's really nice.
So one user thinks it's really nice. That's good to hear. Adobe, no. Smartsheet. Smartsheet is just Excel on steroids. I've only used it a little bit for projects that I'm working on with a partner, and it's a lot of clicks to see certain things. But also, I'm not 100% sure we're using it well. But if you're very comfortable with Excel and you like things that feel like Excel, this is the way to go. If you hate Excel, stay away. We all know Jira, ClickUp. We talked about ClickUp. Microsoft Project. Yeah. Basecamp. Basecamp is the company that has come up with the ShapeUp framework.
That's not the company from Rails creator.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
But the ShapeUp framework seems to try to take Scrum and get rid of the nonsense. I've only read through the first 2 chapters. Yeah, I got to like the middle of the 3rd chapter, or I think I got to here. And so far it looks very good. I'm hoping I can do a presentation on it later, but I wasn't ready to do it for this. So in terms of frameworks, we talked about like Waterfall, we talked about Kanban, we talked about Scrum. ShapeUp, it's not very popular yet, but from what I've been reading, it seems like it could work very nicely, but very like not sure if it's production ready. They say that they use it internally, so that's pretty good. There's also Scalable Agile Framework. Scaled Agile Framework. Also called SAFE. And this is like very enterprisey and very corporate, but I've heard a lot of good things about it from multiple people. It is very process heavy, but if you feel like more process would be helpful for your team, this would definitely be worth looking into, especially for a larger organization. Yeah, there is also a, like I had trouble finding resources on the site, but I only looked at it for like 15 minutes. There is a Coursera course on it if you want to look up kind of a free thing. So yeah. And then, are there any other frameworks that people know of and want to share?
Large scale Scrum.
Large scale Scrum? I have not heard of this. Less?
Yes.
Less is more? Is that what they're going? Oh my god, I hate this. I hate the design. That doesn't mean the framework is bad. The framework might be amazing. Where am I going?
It's kind of idea where like you have a huge corporation, you have to kind of manage different teams to include not only developers but all the other like designers and stuff.
Okay, so it sounds like it's kind of targeting the same niche as Scaled Agile Framework. Okay. Interesting. I don't know what to click here. The very little bit of design education I got is like, okay, my eye goes here and it goes here, and then it kind of wants to stay here, but these colors are balanced on either side, so I don't know where to look. I don't know where to go. Where do I start?
What's with the 2 sprint planning phases?
Oh, God.
All in one sprint, I know.
Sprint planning 1? What and how, yeah. Sprint planning 1 focuses on selection of ready items from those offered by the product owner, wrapping up lingering questions and definition of the sprint goal. Sprint 2 focuses on creating a plan of work to get done for each item. Oh, hey, my team is actually trying to do something like this. It's not working very well. Well, so basically, like, what you have is you have your planning team doing a sprint, and then you have your implementation team doing a sprint, effectively, right? So this is like requirements collection, requirements definition, like open questions, generation and answering. And then this is like, okay, now that we know what needs to be built, like, what are the technical tasks going to be? And then what order do we build them in, right? So I think that makes sense for what Alex was saying, where it incorporates not only the engineers, but the broader people around engineering, which is actually what my team's having problems with now. So yeah, that makes sense. Maybe my team could learn from this and tweak our current process to maybe use learnings from this to do it. But yeah. Does that make sense for what your curiosity was?
No, I just already have a better idea.
Don't knock it till you try it.
Not better, I feel like just sprint planning 1, I feel like just there's different types of meetings they could be having. Why incorporate them into this whole idea of a sprint?
Because stuff needs to be delivered on a schedule and it needs to be committed to. That's the purpose of a sprint. You commit to getting certain work done by a certain date.
I guess I'm thinking more deeper planning that should be done over a period of time for a long, but further into the future than a sprint would go.
Yeah, and that's kind of
I don't
the.
get like it's not needing up.
Yeah, so I think now granted, we've only read like a paragraph of this, so maybe that's covered elsewhere. But my team is experiencing something similar where we're not having enough time to do our longer term planning and figure out what does make sense to do. And instead we're like, okay, I guess this is the next project. Let's figure out how to do this. And then it's not being able to plug in well to all the other stuff. So I think that's kind of what you're describing. I would imagine, if I'm kind of having faith in that this is well done, which is not, I don't know, I'm just going to assume that this is done well. They probably have the like broader level planning as a separate step. And then this first sprint planning as like, okay, this is what we're going to do next. Let's figure out like, what does that mean? And if that is what it's meant to be, then yeah, it totally makes sense.
So maybe give you like more background. Let's say that there's a CEO and he wants some kind of complex tool to be able to analyze some like input from a customer and to provide some product. But around this you have front end team with UIs, right? You have several backend teams, right? You have also mobile application and stuff, and like you have to make it work. And on top of this, designers and other stakeholders. So this is where it all comes into play.
That makes sense. Because I think when it comes to summarize for the stream, Alex was talking about how this kind of takes a lot of the non-engineering work and makes sure to incorporate it into the process and make a process for it so that when you get to the engineering work, it's smoother. So in my past experience, when I managed a team that was only engineers and it was much smaller and we had much more limited customers than we have now, just Scrum worked beautifully because we were able to scope the projects very small. We had control over our own roadmap. We had very close relationship with the customers because we had very few customers. And Scrum alone was good enough. But then when my team merged with another team, we doubled the products that we managed. We doubled the number of customers. We had, in addition to like those, we had in each of those areas more customers relying on our stuff more directly and making our stuff more mission critical. So each change became more expensive, right? Because there's a lot more you have to account for. Also, there were higher expectations about quality, these kinds of things. So Scrum alone was no longer good enough because the engineers could pump out stuff very quickly at a very high quality and everything would be okay. But the problem wasn't the engineers. The problem was figuring out what the engineers needed to build and how it needed to be built and what were the open questions and what were the dependencies and what were the side effects, right? And that's all stuff that engineers aren't necessarily geared to figure out, at least when there's like 20 different customers, because that ends up becoming a huge amount of work, and then the engineer is no longer an engineer, right? Or now what they would call it a requirements engineer, right? So what I'm finding is that project management for engineering alone is the easy part. It's all the upstream and downstream stuff that makes it complicated. And so hearing about these frameworks like what is it again? It's large scale Scrum. Is that what you said it's called?
Less, yes.
Okay. So things like large scale Scrum and scaled Agile framework are actually very appealing because they incorporate the broader process. But yeah, Scrum is Docker and like, yeah, safe and less are basically Kubernetes, yeah. Yeah, that's pretty clever. That's a good analogy. I like that. So yeah, I'm hoping that in the future we can do some kind of presentation on safe or less or both, who knows. I was hoping to do it today, but there was no way there was going to be enough time. So yeah. Okay, so we have waterfall, Kanban, Scrum, safe, less. Anything else that people want to share?
Somebody was talking about Notion.
Oh, also shape up. Huh?
Has anybody used Notion before?
Notion for project management? Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, it's horrible.
It's not meant for project management.
So bad.
It's not meant for project management.
They're selling it as a project management.
Notion is horrible as a tool.
Because there's templates, you can use different templates for managing it. So it's about the UI.
Yeah. The difficulty is that like a lot of the project management tools are trying to get into document management as well. And now Notion is a document management tool trying to get into project management. It's like,
Notion is nothing and trying to be everything at the same time.
yeah.
Actually, there was a project we were working on in my previous company. They were using Notion. So they had like a milestone kind of tracker. So you have an area where you're tracking the whole project. And you have even another area where you're assigning tasks. So you have like one person and their tasks, and another person their tasks. So it was like kind of like splitting the work given the person. So it was a little complex for what I call methodology. But there was a guy who was really good at it. And he managed that work.
That's cool.
How does he do it?
So there is something worth noting. If you have a dedicated project manager and they're good, sometimes it doesn't matter what tool. Because like you're saying, that guy was able to make Notion work. Like, I totally believe that. Like, Notion is not a great project management tool compared to these other project management tools. At least not yet, right? But if you get a good enough project manager, they'll make it work. If you ever have a say in like hiring a project manager, make sure you try to make the bar pretty high, because generally the bar is pretty low. But yeah. And there was one other thing. Crap. There was one other thing I wanted to mention and I forgot it. Shit, never mind. I'll remember it in a minute, I hope. No, I do remember. I have a dream. When it comes to project management, right? Why do you do a project? Why do you work on a project?
Deliver results.
To deliver some kind of results. What is that result bound to? Sorry?
You're trying to solve a problem.
Trying to solve a problem. And that problem is generated by? Yeah, there's some kind of customer need or some kind of, something missing, right? Which is correlated with a business goal, right? And so you have this kind of, it's basically a tree structure, right? Because it's always that kind of structure, right? The business has some mission, right? The business identifies problems in a market or problems for users, right? It expects some kind of results, and then you define a project to deliver those results, and then you define work items to deliver that project, right? If you look at systems like OKRs and KPIs, they're all meant to kind of solve this tree problem without actually making a tree. So someday, the next hackathon that I can go to, I want to build some system like this. So if anyone's looking for a hackathon partner, let me know. Because I think the way we manage organizational work is dumb, and I want to fix it. But yeah. Sorry, little tangent there. But if anyone has ideas, let me know. We can talk about that at dinner time. So we got 15 minutes left. We kind of ditched the mock project thing. I'm sorry. Anything else? Any other stories people want to share, or tips or tricks, or is there? Here we go. Let's do this more directed. Is there anything you guys have experienced in a project where you're like, "Wow, that was clever. I want to do that in every project now."
Well, I experience.
Sorry?
I experiment horrible experience.
You've had horrible experiences?
Do you mind if you go back to GitHub?
GitHub? Sure.
What you're working on. Like, something that was really interesting, where you can track the date, starting date. I think, is it current date iteration something? The current one, like on top.
Current iteration? Oh, yeah. So current iteration seems like a sprint, basically.
My items, is it my items? I think there must be a column. My items. Yeah, that's the one. So everything you're working on, you can like set up everything from like the experiment
Mm.
on my left. On my left. Right. So you have like a task here, and then you have you can assign it to somebody if it's an issue.
Yeah.
You have like different priorities for that.
So you could basically pick this and be like, okay, this is going to be me.
Assigning is up there, then
Go to my items.
so once you add in the dates here, it's gonna show up on the roadmap. So the dates, you can go on the extreme left. My left, sorry.
You're right?
My left.
You were
As in
left.
My right, my right, my right.
Oh, okay.
What? So down, down, down.
No?
So you can add like some columns here.
Yeah, you can add
Starting,
columns.
all that.
So I think
So
there
you
is.
add it, but I can't see it.
So if we go to settings, right? They have this estimate column, right? And so you can do that. You can set that as a number. Here we go. Start date and end date.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it looks like those are just missing from the issue. So
So once you add those, you get like a roadmap.
got it.
If you add them there, you have to select them.
The estimate kind of becomes the historical line.
Yeah.
So once you put it there and you go try to track it, like let's say you give it like start date and then end date, then you go to roadmaps. Then why is it not showing?
Then I need to save or something?
Yeah.
Is it cells? No, actually you don't have to save it. Like it just shows up.
That's odd.
It has to show up. Unless if it's is it an issue already?
Ah, because it's using the iteration.
Yeah, so it just shows it everything, like
Yeah.
day by day.
Yeah. So cool,
But
but it sounds like waterfall.
yeah,
And now, if you're doing waterfall, perfect. All right. But be aware, if you're doing this kind of thing, you're doing waterfall. And again, you want to make sure that if you're doing waterfall, it's a conscious choice. Okay. And the date stuff, if you study Scrum, they actually strongly discourage dates. They instead encourage using points, which is a measurement of effort or complexity, not a measure of hours, not a measure of time. And the reason for that is because, complexity, like, if you get used to certain levels of complexity, you can still solve stuff faster. And also engineers like automate stuff. So if something's simple, they'll just automate it. And usually when you're planning a sprint, in this case an iteration, you do it based on your total amount of complexity or effort, not based on time. And so that's kind of more like the Scrum way of doing things. But I also haven't had a whole lot of success with that because people's velocity is not as consistent. So velocity is the number of story points completed per sprint. Their velocity is not always as consistent as you would expect.
Stress element. I was just about to say, oh, that sounds less stressful, but the stress element's removed. I only have 3 days to do this one task because that's what I said I'm going to do it in. And then like, where it's like, oh, it's 3 points.
Well, so there's the thing though, is you say, oh, it's just this amount of effort, but the deadline is still the sprint.
I understand this, but you mentioned velocity. I'm just talking about like adding. It's like something's traveling through space, but like you're giving it a push. Every time you finish a task, you're pushing it.
Right.
And so instead of just I gotta get there at some point, I have a steady velocity.
Yeah. You were gonna say?
So most of the times what we used to do was like you set up a task of like 3 days.
Mm.
So you talk to the guy like, okay, you know what are you working on? What's my timeline? Okay, how many days can you do this?
Mm.
And you talk it over. Then the guy's like, okay, 2 days, then you give it. Like, okay, do it in 3 days.
Mm.
And then he has like brief you like every day, takes you through what he has done and how far he's going and what his implementation approach will be.
Mm.
So that's the thing that's why we use like the dead thing.
Yeah.
But like each day somebody comes up with the what.
Yeah. That makes sense. So, huh.
Because something we implemented later on, this is just a particular company that I worked with. We would have our sprints, but like we would make it such that okay, you would code for 1 week, and then you'd have like I don't remember how many days, but you'd need like 3 days at the end of the sprint for bug fixing. Because we were like in this constant process of trying to constantly move through stages while developing. So like I didn't say it was smart. I'm just
Yeah.
saying like what was my question? I don't think I have a question. I think I was just pointing out something stupid.
So the thing, depending on whom you ask, that's not necessarily the wrong way to do things. Having bug fixes be part of the sprint, there are ways of doing Scrum where that's kind of a thing. And some, like Jira, for example, when you create a Scrum project, there's no story points for bugs, which is weird. That drives me mad. I'm like, what the hell? Because I think it's assumed that ideally you would catch the bug in the same sprint, and it would effectively be part of the work of implementing that feature. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but the idea is with Scrum, the goal is to have consistent delivery, right? So even if you're giving yourself a buffer to do like bug fixes, if you're still able to deliver a consistent number of points, you're good. Right? Because then you can scope stuff down to be like, okay, we know we can deliver like 40 points. So let's like make sure that whatever we determine gets scaled down to 40 points. And so we can deliver every sprint, right? And if that 40 points is leaving room for bugs and then you spend like the last third of the sprint doing bugs, that's fine, right? The point is consistency so that you can make things predictable, so that you can release predictably.
Can I have something?
Yeah.
But you're gonna hate it, like, in advance. Like, well, there's cases like, for example, my experience, you can develop something, you can build things, and like you deploy it, and usually there is a QA team, they take over. And for QA team to test it and get back to you with feedback, it may take, well, let's say a week.
Mm.
Well, like, and then after this, you have to work on this again, or like either you mark it done. So, and it's kind of unpredictable because they take a lot of time to test this.
Mm.
This kind of being a project manager, how do you apply those things?
Yeah.
You have a QA team. Well, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, so that's exactly the struggle we're having now.
It's not that simple, right?
Right. So for the benefit of the stream, in the case where you have QA, right, like QA takes time, and QA is blocked by development. So how do you do QA in a reasonable amount of time? Is that a decent summary? Okay. So that's exactly what we're experiencing and we're trying to figure out. In my mind, in an ideal world, right, QA would define all their test cases at requirements time, and then they would define JIRA issues that are blocked by the development issues. And as the development issues are completed, they work on their their issues, right? But the problem is they still take time, and you still have bugs that come after that, right?
Right.
So it's not entirely a solved problem. Right now, what we do is we just slow our delivery timeline, and we just have development and QA as separate sprints, and we allocate. So basically, QA is doing testing of the previous sprint's development, and then each sprint we allow some buffer to work on the bugs that QA generates. So that's kind of how we're doing it now, kind of similar to what he was saying. But it's unfortunate because then everything takes twice as long because we have to wait.
The other team actually, or the same team? QA, do they have their own team where they basically have their own?
Functionally, they're the same team.
Same team.
Functionally, on the org structure, no, but like I and my teammate manage engineer and QA time similarly. Yeah.
Okay.
Why do you ask?
Just because like it takes too long for us,
Mm.
and usually like you always miss the delivery because
Yeah, because no one accounts for QA time.
if I'm QA like a startup, and
Yeah.
I test myself, like okay, I know what to fix.
So I have a question. When do your QA people define their test cases?
Jira tickets.
When in the process?
Planning.
During planning.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Because theoretically, if they know what their test cases are, they should be able to estimate their test case time. And if they're able to estimate how long their test cases take, you should be able to include that in the sprint plan.
That's right, but also because there are separate teams, they have incoming tickets and other tests to test.
Oh, so they serve more than one team.
Yes.
Okay, that's a problem. So ideally, you want like a QA person dedicated to a specific project and a specific team, because then, yeah, otherwise you can't predict. So one thing we have for example, we actually have a similar issue where our QA person handles multiple, because we only have one QA person. She handles, QA engineer, I should say, because she does code. She handles multiple projects. But we are very strict about you do not handle multiple projects at one time. You do your QA for this project, and then the next project just has to wait, and then it's on the PMs to try to make all that timing work. And so in that way, the QA doesn't have to do as much context switching, and we can be more predictable about when the work gets done. Now, that does have the potential to slow things down, but we work very hard to minimize that. And because the stuff becomes more predictable, we can at least figure out ways to keep it from slowing things down by basically kind of leapfrogging projects with her. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I do not recommend having a QA person work on multiple projects. To me, that seems dangerous. But also, like, I'm sure there's some PM out there on the internet who's going to look at this and be like, Beege, you're a fucking idiot. And they're not wrong. I am not the most experienced PM. But yeah, that's my thought on it. Open to alternatives, though. Does that kind of answer your question then?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any other questions with the 3 minutes we have left? Also, sorry for cursing so much on the stream. It's a passionate topic about
Can I
it.
throw in a quick question again?
Yeah.
So let's say for project managers, you're a project manager. Are you supposed to also understand, there is lots of tickets and tasks to manage. Are you supposed to understand what those tickets are about?
Okay.
You don't end up just managing everything and assigning things and just doing the ceremonies.
I should have put this in the presentation. Thank you for bringing it up. Not a hot take, a controversial take, because I thought about it a lot. A PM does not need to know technology. Damn it. Internet, I'm telling you, a PM does not need to know technology. Full stop. The best PM I've ever had didn't even know what the hell a database was. Okay? Like, he's like, what was it? Is it like a file? Is it like what's a database, right? He had no idea. I mean, technically a file can be a database. Yeah. Previous to being RPM, he was an air traffic controller for Apache helicopters, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Displays.
Yeah. Very, very organized. So what he would do, and this is where the soft skills of PM come in, and this is what kind of separates a senior PM from a more junior PM. If an engineer goes like, yeah, I guess it'll be like a 4-point thing, I guess. The PM will go, that did not sound confident. I don't know what the hell the work is, but that did not sound confident. He'd be like, how about an 8 instead of a 4? And the engineer would be like, yeah, well, I mean, I could get it done faster. He's like, no, you're getting an 8. If you get it done faster, cool. But you're not confident about this, you're going to get more time. Because, again, you want to make sure everything committed to the sprint gets done. If there's extra time, cool, you can do more. But finish your commitment.
I would almost argue it would be better not to have experience in the field for which you work because that creates not a bias, but just this like empathy.
Yeah.
If you will.
No, I agree. So the comment was, it might even be better for the PM to not have technical experience. Now, I have experienced this because I'm a PM that is also / was an engineer. And there are times where I'm like, they said an 8, but that really sounds like a 4, right? And in the past, when I was first doing this, I would be like, you sure you can't do it in 4? No, a PM should not do that, right? A PM should almost always argue for more time than less. Or figure out a way to break things down to make smaller increments and then like move stuff around if you need. So that is another thing of that PM that I had who was non-technical but very good. If we were like, oh, this is 16 points, he'd be like, no. It would be like, no, it's 16 points worth of effort. It's like, no, I get that, but you're not putting a 16-point task in the sprint. You're going to break it down into smaller pieces. Well, it's really 16 points. It's like, no, think about it. I don't know what the hell it is, but think about it. There's a way you can break it down more. That's a good PM. We do have a comment from online. When do you think project management philosophies become practical? E.g. time sync for small projects, Kanban great for even for individuals, full philosophies or corporate. I think that's spot on. So to kind of, because I just read through that. For your guys' benefit, I believe what the person is saying is, there's like, you have something simple like Kanban, which has very minimal structure, and then you have like safe, right, which is like the big giant thing, or less, which is the big giant thing. When do different projects fit for different teams? Because, if you're doing safe, there's a lot of overhead, right? Or Scrum has the 5 different rituals, right? I think it's kind of a part of me wants to say, oh, do this for that team size, do that for that team size. But I don't think team size is necessarily the metric to use. I think for better or worse, the best way is to kind of experiment, because some teams are very good at self-organizing, and you could just throw a Scrum board up and they're good. If they're proactive, if they're good communicators, even if it's a large team, if their communication cycles are super short, and they're able to deliver fast and also communicate fast, Kanban might be good enough. But if you have people who maybe they're not so proactive, or the stuff is so complicated that they can't keep everything in their head all at once, you might have like an engineering team of like 4 people, right? But then they interact with a whole bunch of other teams, and there's a whole bunch of communication that happens that they're not necessarily in control over, and that takes a lot of time and effort. Maybe Kanban's not good enough. But one thing I will note, that despite what project system you're using, track all of your work, right? If you need to have a conversation with someone, that should be a Jira issue, right? Or whatever system you're using, right? If you need to schedule something, like, that might need to be like a work item, like a Jira issue or something. So for example, my calendar, like if some of you have seen my calendar, that shit is nuts, right? So like, sometimes scheduling something takes like 15 or 30 minutes, because like, when the hell do we fit this for all these people? Oh, I have to talk to this person to move that meeting. I have to talk to that person to move that meeting, right? So if there's work you have to do, even if you're an engineer and it's not engineering work, make a task for it, okay? Because it takes up time, it takes up effort, it is time and effort you could be spending on something else, okay? So if you have to spend time and effort on it, make a task for it, okay? If it's like a 5-minute thing, maybe not, right? But if it ends up being like a conversation you need to have with someone where it's not a quick yes or no answer, make a task for it. So, and record the decisions, yes. Although, one thing to be careful of is do not use your task management system as where you record decisions of record, because it's good to go figure out when the decision was made and by whom. But when people are searching for decisions that were made as documentation, they're not going to search the task system. So this is why one big advantage that Atlassian has is the connection between Jira and Confluence. They work very nicely together. So you can basically say like, okay, here's the decision in Jira, make a Confluence page for this. This is where the decision is recorded as documentation. And that is slick. But like, it's just easier to do in Jira. You should be doing that regardless of what system you're using. If you're like using Asana and Notion, fine. Like, same idea. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I hope that answers your question, William. I know it wasn't like an exact, like structured formulaic answer, but life is not that simple. So I would say, I think determining which project management methodology is practical depends on the complexity of the project along with the people involved on the project. And that's something you just kind of have to figure out. I think that's what separates a junior from a senior. And I'm definitely not senior yet, maybe. Well, don't let my boss see that from my performance review. Cool. All right, anything else before we end?
Not related to live chat, but how do you join live chat?
How do you join live chat? So I'm streaming on YouTube.
Yeah, I am watching on YouTube. My eyes are not good.
Are you logged in?
Yes, so I didn't see the live.
Interesting. That is a great question. We're gonna have some kind of inception going on here. So I don't think you have to subscribe in order to chat. I know we're going on a tangent, but it's just gonna take a second. Interesting. It's just there for
That
me.
is
That is a
Yeah,
great
I can
question.
see it.
We're gonna have some kind of inception going on here. Maybe your window is too
So,
small.
I
don't think you have to subscribe I don't in know. order to chat. I wonder if we
The app or the browser?
do. So
No, we're not on
if you
a
make
tangent,
the
but
nope,
it's
it
just
still
gonna
shows up if you scroll down. Interesting.
It's just there for me.
Yeah, I don't know.
A great question.
All right. Anyway,
We're gonna have
and then we had another question from chat. What advice do you have for devs who find themselves bottom of the totem pole in an environment where the development philosophy is failing badly, possibly even from the outset? Okay, so this is getting into a concept of like leading from below. Questions. Questions are great. So if you're here, let me, maybe I will just put this up here. Oh my God, where'd it go? Okay, so actually I don't know if because they can always go back and look at the chat anyway, so it doesn't matter if their name is seen here. What advice do you have for devs who find themselves bottom of the totem pole in an environment where the development philosophy is failing badly, possibly even from the outset? So that is when I'm trying to consider like the most toxic environment possible. I would ask questions as innocently as possible. So if the PM was doing a shit job and stuff was being delivered off time and off target, I would ask the PM, hey, do you think projects are going smoothly? And they might be like yes, because maybe they're afraid that you're questioning their ability. And then you can say, okay, but I feel I want to go faster, right? I want project work to go faster, and I wonder if there's a better way we could be doing it. And then they might tell you like, well, that's not your job, right? Like, leave me to my job. And it's like, okay, but is there anything that you've wanted to try for project management? Because then, like, when you kind of go in that route, you're not necessarily criticizing them, right? Because once you do that, they're out, right? They get into fighting mode, and you're not having a good time. But if you kind of get into a brainstorming mode of like, hey, here's an interesting problem that you might care about. Do you have an interest in trying to solve it, or do you have an interest in thinking about it, right? And be like, is there anything you want to try, or is there anything you think I could be doing better? Like, if you also say it as like, hey, what do you want me to do things better? And they're like, well, I want you to be faster. And it's like, I'm trying that. Is there anything else you want me to try? Right? This kind of thing. It does require an extraordinary amount of patience and very much managing your emotional state, because chances are they will shit on you at some point in the conversation. And you just have to be ready for it, and you just have to take it, because getting upset about them shitting on you is not going to help you solve the problem. So you basically have to say, hey, I feel like things could be better. What do you think we can do to make things better, right? Or, hey, like, I want to be like the best project team in the world. Like, what do you think? How do you think we can get there, right? There's different ways you can approach it depending on the person's personality and these kinds of things. It's really difficult to give advice in a general sense, more of like different ways to think about solving the problem. But it's more of a people issue. And I think to really, it sounds like this might be coming from personal experience. So maybe like DM me on Discord so you can tell me more details, because then I can maybe give a little bit better advice. But it's definitely good to pursue, like, how do you think we can make things better? Because you're saying, like, first off, you're showing that you trust them, that they have the ability to make things better, right? Because you're asking them instead of someone else, right? And then 2, you're not necessarily saying that things are bad, right? So maybe earlier when I said like, hey, I feel like projects are not going great, maybe actually don't say that. In hindsight, that was a mistake. Don't say that, because then they're going to feel bad and they're going to get defensive and you're not going to have a good time. But you're going to be like, hey, do you think we can make projects faster somehow? Or, hey, do you think like we could make the requirements clearer somehow so that we can get stuff delivered faster? Or like, hey, I feel like, you know, it's a little slow between the transition from dev to QA. What do you think we could do about that, right? Basically, give them a problem to solve, framed in a way that kind of makes them feel good, like they're the one you're asking. It's like, you're smart. Solve this difficult problem because you're smart, right? And kind of open up the conversation that way. Because if a question is asked in an innocent enough manner, even in a very toxic environment, it's going to be difficult for them to shit on you, right? Now, if it's like the most toxic environment, you're screwed anyway, like go elsewhere. But I think that might be a viable strategy if things are salvageable. Does that answer your question, Will? I'm going to assume yes, because we are actually beyond time now. And I think people want to eat. And it is a tricky one.
Was this a subordinate having a problem with the customer?
So it sounds like a junior level engineer seeing that projects, or rather the method of managing projects is just trash. I mean, it can be pretty.
I'm thinking from a project manager.
I mean, no. That's a decent question.
Some cases, most companies, they have their own time.
Sounds good, Will.
So if you're really good at what you do, sometimes you may go faster, and then that's a problem.
Right.
Because they have like a different timeline.
Yeah.
So you start fighting because you're doing something really fast, and they want you to slow down. So the situations like those, like I encountered one myself, like
But-
you do something really fast, and then you kind of like breaking the timeline. Like the PM has told the CEO that okay, this is going to be done here, then you get to do it faster, then the invoices are going to come in with less pay because the job is done.
So
So that becomes a problem.
so
the invoice is not like
so in my mind, if you're having this issue where you're finishing stuff too fast and the invoicing is not so clear, like, first off, that's not a you problem. Secondly, that can be solved by communication, right? They could tell you like, hey, we know you can deliver this faster, but can you slow it down? Or, hey, can you spend more time on this to improve the quality? Right? Because if you're finishing stuff like a week early, maybe there are ways you could improve the quality to like take up the rest of the time. Maybe you could add more edge case testing. Or maybe you could like throw in some CI, even if that wasn't part of the original contract, right? Or maybe you could fix up the documentation a little bit more. Or maybe you could like reconfigure the linter to be really nice or something, right? There's always ways, there's plenty of work to do, right? It's just figuring out what you can do.
sometimes you can work on the project and you do a push, and there's this automated system
Mm.
that happens,
Yeah.
and everything is shipped to production.
Yeah.
The client sees the change, oh, okay, you fixed it. Oh, this is our invoice. So you see, so then
That's
that.
just wrong.
That's not how it should.
There was
So-
a project that I was working on like that. It was a UN project. So
Yeah.
I think, like we had to change a few things in the screen and all that stuff.
So that,
The boss was like, we can do it in a week. Then he wanted me to do it in a day. When I finished it, I told him, okay, that. And he's like, okay, just push it. When I
but then,
pushed it, there was an automated background system.
yeah,
That I think it was a
CI/CD, yeah.
Then it just pushed everything to production.
Yep.
And the guy was paid 1 day instead of a week.
Oh, yeah, that sucks.
Say, he was really pissed.
But that's why I don't like billing by time. I think billing by time was like the worst idea ever. But anyway, so we're gonna close up because we're beyond time now. One thing I do want to announce is I'm planning to, and really I need to plan it this weekend because we're getting too close now. I would like to do kind of a little DevOps boot camp kind of thing on Solal because we have, or during Solal because we have a lot of people who don't have solo commitments. Or actually, I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a DevOps bootcamp or a backend bootcamp or both. I still need to plan it out. But I'm going to do something like that. Also, it's not going to be here because, there's a couple of days that are still working days. So I have to figure out a location for it. So be ready for that. I'm hoping I can figure it out tomorrow or if not this week. And I will announce it. And it is going to be like a week thing, a 1 week thing. So if you have friends who would be interested, please let them know. Also, if you have a strong opinion as to whether it should be backend DevOps or both, do note that if you ask for both, there's going to be less depth on both. If it's only one, we're going to go deeper. But if either of those sound appealing, let me know. And it would be going from like, nothing to like, you're capable and can build something at least at a basic level. Well, when I say nothing, for the backend one, it assumes you at least know a programming language. Okay, I'm not going to teach you like Python from scratch or something like that. But I'll be very clear about what the prerequisites are, what you can expect from it, what the curriculum will be, and what will be done on each day. And I'll share that as soon as I finish it. So if you have ideas, if you have feedback, if you're like, hey, are you going to cover this or that, feel free to toss it my way, and it'll be good. Or if anyone wants to help out with it, let me know.
Is it going to be connected to cloud, like the website? Is it Kubernetes? Or is it going to be like cloud with no Kubernetes, no Docker?
It will probably, I don't know yet, honestly. And I don't, I'm trying to make decisions on the fly less, because I do that a lot and it usually works out, but lately it hasn't been, so I'm trying not to. But yeah, if we do DevOps, I imagine it probably would include cloud, but the problem is there's a cost to that. There's a whole bunch of logistics of figuring out cloud stuff, and I don't know if I want to handle that. Also, the last time, when I was in the US and I did a big cloud thing where I pre-allocated stuff for people, I forgot to tear it down for 1 or 2 months, and then AWS actually called me on my phone and was like, you owe us $4,000, pay up. And I was like, oh, ow, never doing that again. Yeah, so... But yeah, if you're interested in this bootcamp, let me know. I'm sorry for talking so much. Let's go eat. Okay, bye.